Okay, folks, I'm going to kick off. I'm sure if other people arrive in a moment, they can join in, or this webinar is going to be recorded. And so we'll make it available on our website afterwards. That's octiga.io. All right, so this is a webinar. We chose the opportunity to do this as part of Cybersecurity Month. Which is a fantastic thing, really, to make people Cybersecurity Awareness Month, to make people aware, obviously, of cybersecurity risks and general cybersecurity awareness. Because I often think that cybersecurity is one of those things that people sort of kick down the road in their list of priorities. Is it immediate? Maybe not. Is the problem immediate? Am I being hacked right now? Maybe not. So they kick the problem down the road, and then the problem presents itself at a later time when, of course, they do have some kind of data leak or they do have some kind of breach within their organization. And I've seen it in every organization I've ever worked at. Not all were hacked. Some had internal breaches and some had hacks, and most of them were discovered long after the hack had occurred, which is quite sad, really. In the cases, in my experience, they weren't very costly. However, they can be very, very costly, as you may be well aware. And so what we wanted to do here is, as a company, Octiga, our raison d'etre is to bring cybersecurity to small to medium enterprises who may not maybe know of the risk or may not have the time or resources to alleviate those risks. And so on and so forth. And so what we've chosen to do as a company is to secure Office 365. And so because we realize that many companies around the world, about 40% market share is what Office 365 has for small to medium, for enterprises around the world. And many small to medium enterprises use Office 365 as really the linchpin of their business. All of their emails, all of their sharing, all of their communications, all of their documents are all within Office 365, whether it be through Outlook, Exchange, SharePoint, OneDrive, Teams. And so it's really the backbone of many small to medium enterprises. And indeed, the smaller the enterprise, that we find that the less other applications they use. So we often, Office 365 becomes the almost entire risk surface for an organization. So our raison d'etre is to really help people secure Office 365. So I'm bringing this webinar today to give people a small overview. It's not going to go too deep. Hopefully I'll get through this in about 25-30 minutes, maybe even less. I haven't really timed it, to show people a little bit of the surface of how they can secure Office 365 and indeed their organization. Really, some of the things I'll talk about are about securing the organization even outside of Office 365. Just really good things to do, sort of the top 10, if you like, simple things without becoming IT cybersecurity gurus. These are something that any non-technical or technical person can do. So I'll dive right in to my presentation here. So the first thing we want to look at is our users. And this might seem very, very obvious to people and maybe less so to others. Who are the users in your system? Why are they users in the system? And what kind of accounts do they have? The right accounts for the right people at the right times. Okay, so you need full control of this as an organization, and you need to be able to audit this fully as an organization. And we often don't think of this too much. We create users, we give them passwords, we assume those passwords are secure. Maybe we put on two-factor authentication, we create some administrators, and we plow on with our business. But have any of us really taken time to audit the users within our organization? Because I think that's a very important thing to do. And there's a couple of little rules of thumb. They're very, very simple, but they can really help you secure your organization a little better. The first is to take a look at administrators. In previous companies that I've worked for, there was accounts created such as administrator@thecompany.com, and this is really not a good pattern to use. We should really be treating admins as very important rights given to specific persons. Okay, and if you do find in your organization that you have other administrators that seem to be not associated with a person, if the person's name is not in that admin email address, so to speak, that user login, then we should be really suspect as to why that administrator exists. And the reason for this is really audit purposes, so that when a person acts, Bob, who is you know, Bob is maybe an admin in the company, and he's hired as an IT administrator. And so his admin is a role for him as Bob, the IT administrator. And we need to think of admins as a role which is separate to the person, but is connected to the person and is followed through an audit trail. Okay, so the first thing we want to do is we want to make sure that all admins are tied to people. And the simple thing to do is, if you have an administrator at yourcompany.com, think about removing that and look at all the people who require administrative access, and then create administrator accounts. For example, Bob_admin at yourcompany.com. And now you have an audit trail. The other reason for this is that Bob is not exposing his administrative privileges and credentials unnecessarily. For example, if Bob had a mailbox and Bob was breached, and his administrative privileges, that's a very serious problem. Administrative access really gives you the keys to your kingdom, and you really don't want that. So you need to treat admins as separate but connected to the person. The other thing you want to do, as I said, is you never want to share those admins. So if you have accounts called admin at yourcompany.com, get rid of it. Think about it, and don't share those credentials about. Tie those to a person. Okay. Looking at, I've got some illustrative examples of this. So, for example, when we look at the administrators within our Microsoft Office 365 Administrative Center, we can take a look through all of the users, and we can click a filter here, that will allow us to see all the different types of admins. The most common, of course, is the global admin, and you'll find there'll be lots of these within your company. However, there is many other types of admins, and these should be considered where required. If you go down here to roles, you can see the many common roles that are used within Microsoft, and Microsoft supports these roles very well, and so they should be considered for those various purposes. Flicking back to my presentation, the other part of administrators that people don't really think about is admins and mailboxes, and I alluded to this in my first slide. The theory here is that admins should not have mailboxes. Now, normally many companies will think of Bob. Bob has a role in the company. Bob is an IT administrator. Bob needs a mailbox, and Bob also needs admin rights. So therefore, give Bob a mailbox and give that mailbox, that user login, administrative rights. And as I stated earlier, that's a very bad idea, because if Bob gets phished and Bob enters his credentials into a site that isn't Microsoft, and Bob gets hacked, then you've lost your administrative privilege. You've let out your administrative privileges to the world. So what you want to be doing here is you want to be separating those mailboxes out, so that Bob with his mailbox is Bob at thecompany.com, and then create a separate administrative account, Bob_admin at yourcompany.com, and do not give that account a mailbox. Remember, in Office 365, accounts that don't have mailboxes are not licensed, and you do not pay any more money for them. So while you do pay for your mailboxes invariably, you can create other accounts that are without mailboxes that you don't have to be paying for. For example, if I take a look at some of these here, I can see that a lot of companies will do this kind of thing where they'll create a company administrator, and the administrator will have a user mailbox, or they might have multiple administrative accounts and that user has a mailbox. And this is really, really a no-no in this example. The other thing you want to be doing is you want to be deleting administrators that you don't need. Swinging back. Now, the other part of this is shared mailboxes. Now, this is something that happens less, because, as I said, mailboxes are usually paid for, but you do see it happening in companies that maybe aren't watching their invoices so closely, and they need something, for example, like accounts at theircompany.com or info at theircompany.com. And a common one is service at your company. Maybe it's your SLAs for your service, so that people can raise tickets within your organization, and they email that service at yourcompany.com. And you want to watch out here that that's not created as a true mailbox in itself, with its own password that people can log in by, because what will happen is that password will get shared around, and that password becomes weak because people are sharing it around. And the problem is when that account gets breached, there's no audit trail to find out who was it that was logged into that account at the time? You know, who's to blame? You know, was it internal? Was it external? You just don't know. Now, a lot of people will know this and they won't be creating mailboxes that are shared like that, because it does cost money to do that. But the mistake does happen. We do see that. And the thing to obviously do here is to create a delegate mailboxes. Delegate mailboxes, as you may know, is a feature within Office 365, and where you can create all sorts of mailboxes where people will have full access to read the mail or to read and send mail through those mailboxes, and then they'll appear as items within your Outlook as separate mailboxes almost. And many of you may be very familiar with these. However, some people aren't, and it should be pointed out. The very important part about this, of course, is that you get the audit trail of delegate mailboxes. So in recap, these are the very, very simple things. You might have thought, oh, duh, Rob, these are very, very, very simple things that I already know about. But look, maybe there might be something in here that you don't know about, and they should be pointed out. This is your basic bread and butter. Audit your users, your mailboxes with admins, your admins associated with people. Get that in order, and then you can move on to the rest of your security journey. Okay, second slide, manage credentials. Obvious, might be quite obvious to some people, but this is one of there's two parts of this which are often used within companies that are not done well. And the first one is the management of passwords, and the second one is two-factor authentication. Invariably, passwords are not managed within companies very well at all. Password policies are something that you should have within your company. Within your IT security policy, you should have a password policy, so that you're telling people, how do you create passwords? What are unique passwords? And you should have a unique password for each and every account that you use. You should do this in your personal life, and you should do this in your business life. It's very, very simple thing to do. It does create a problem, and people think, how am I going to remember all my passwords? And of course, there's a solution for that as well. But it is the secure way of doing things. The reason why we don't want to share passwords, obviously, is if I create a password for my Office 365 and I call it Rob's Great Password, and it may even be a strong password, but then I also use that same password in another account, some dodgy account that I have out in the internet for garden sheds, who knows? And that website, because its security is less so than Office 365, gets breached, then I've lost those credentials to the world. And that's an example of something you really don't want to do, because by association, your Office 365 username and password has now also been breached. It may just take the hackers some amount of small time to figure out that you've got an Office 365 account and to get in there and hack that. So you really need rules around password pickings. The problem is when you tell people to create unique passwords for every site, they start to pick words that they really know very well. The first thing they'll do is they'll take the name of the company or the name of the department they work in, or the name of their kids or their dogs, and they shouldn't be doing this. There's two general strategies to picking passwords that work fairly well. The first one is to pick a group of specific words and maybe some numbers that people, it might be a sentence. I went on holidays to Mallorca, is not something that's going to be hacked very easily. I ate some crepes in Mallorca. That's a perfectly good password and it's memorable. A better version of that would be create passwords that are completely long, randomized, unique strings. Passwords, and that's much more secure. This then creates a problem in itself, because you ask people to create a randomized string. There is no way they can remember that password. So what happens next is they then create some kind of a file, and they store that file on their computer. They might ziplock it or something like that, and they fill it with all of their passwords, and that's very, very unsecure, and you don't want to create unsecure copies of your passwords. And so the thing to use is usually something like a password manager. These are fantastic applications. We personally use LastPass, although I'm not advocating LastPass per se. There are many of them, Dashlane, 1Password, and they're fantastic things. And we would use them throughout our company, and I also use them in my personal life. And I have this right up here in my dashboard, so I can click in here and I can look at all of the different things I'm logged into. For example, I'm logged into Prezi right now. LastPass has recognized that it's Prezi and will give me the password for Prezi straight away. Okay, and what happens when you create passwords with these password managers is that you can use them to generate secure passwords, and then when you enter those passwords and register for a site, it will automatically ask you, do you want me to store this password for this site? And it's then stored securely. And the next time you come back to that site, it'll autofill that into the site for you, as long as you're on your browser, on your computer, and your computer should be necessarily locked, as most of our computers are. So now all your passwords are secure within this password manager. The second level of that, which is useful, is you can have LastPass or one of these password managers link your personal and your business account together so they appear under the same menu, so to speak. This is very useful because most of us use the same computer for our business and our personal use at various times. So you want to be able to access your Gmail account when you're at home, your password, but also your Office 365 when you're at work. And you need to be able to do that very, very quickly and securely. And LastPass or one of these password managers provides that for us. Taking this to a company level, LastPass provides business versions. You know, these password managers provide business versions, and then the company can centrally manage that. Now the company has audit on those passwords, has full control on those passwords, not on the personal versions, but on the business ones. Although you can link your personal account. And then the company can revoke passwords. There's also password sharing within there. You generally don't want to share passwords, but there is cases, for example, we would use them for development sandboxes where we share them amongst our, share them amongst developers, for example, where you truly need to share a password. And the whole advantage of this is you create a culture within your company where you encourage unique, strong passwords, and you have a tool that manages that new problem of creating these unintelligible passwords. Look, I've gone on about passwords quite a lot. Some of you might find this very, very obvious, but ask yourself, how many passwords do you have out there that you use for different sites and it's the same password? Many of us do this all the time, and it's a terrible, terrible idea. Anyway, how this connects with Office 365, not directly. However, what we can do with our password managers is we can do a single sign-on with many of them so that they're linked and managed with single sign-on to Office 365. So now Office 365 gets into the loop and you can better manage that as a company. Beyond that, password managers are not connected with Office 365 per se, but they're a very good tool that works alongside. The other side of credential management is, of course, this is the elephant in the room, folks, multi-factor authentication. Basically, you should use it, and you should use it everywhere. All accounts should have multi-factor authentication. It basically changes the chances of you being breached and reduces them by orders of magnitude. It does require a little bit of upskilling for employees. It requires them to have a smartphone or some other device. If they don't have a smartphone, there is other ways for it to work. They could use a desk phone and you can get a call, but that's generally not as used as much as you can use a little app on your smartphone, which many of you are aware of, or you can get a text message. And simply it is that if someone breaches your password, they probably don't have your smartphone. So they need your password and something you know and something you have. Look, you probably are all aware of what 2FA is, but it's surprising how much this is not turned on in many companies. You want to be turning this on for your users, but also for your administrators. Essentially your administrators first. If you're adverse to MFA for any reason, please, please, please turn it on for your administrators immediately. And of course, some of you may be adverse to this because your administrators were shared, but if you remember back to our first slide, administrators should not be shared. So now we've given that administrator to a person, the person owns that administrator, and that person has a smartphone. So now the loop is complete, so to speak. So we should be turning on 2FA for our administrators and indeed for all the other users within our company. This will keep us quite secure. Now, there is ways around 2FA. It's not that common. You do see instances in companies where hackers breach an MFA'd account and then send out the little notification, and users are so used to hitting and accepting these notifications that they just do it automatically. And so you just need to train people up a little bit in I guess, not doing that. Now, moving on. So we've talked about admins and users in Mailbox, and we've talked about credentials. The other one, getting a little deeper into Office 365, remote access. This is very topical, especially at the moment with us all working from home. I'm in my upstairs room right now. And the question is I have to access Office 365 from outside of the building that may be my organization. So what are the protocols that I need to do that? And what do I require and what do I not require? So I use it on my smartphone. I have Outlook on my smartphone. So that's one type of protocol. There's other types of older protocols for older clients, and they may not be required. The problem is some of these protocols are less secure than others. But essentially, you can think of them as multiple doors into your business for each user. And you want to lock the ones that you do not need. So if you've got remote workers and they require to use Outlook for the web all the time, then allow them to do that. But if they do not use Outlook for the web and they only use Outlook maybe through their secured mobile device and through their laptop through Outlook, then turn off Outlook for the web. It's a real common way that hackers, once they have a password, will go in and do their dirty deeds within your Office 365. There's other protocols for mobile access. I think I have a list of them in here, if I can just find the tab. So there's the common ones are POP and IMAP. We consider these to be quite bad. They're legacy protocols and they're quite insecure. A number of other ones which you want to consider are mobile Outlook app, OWA, which is Outlook Web Access, Exchange Web Services. So do you want to have people accessing Outlook through their mobiles? You need to make that decision. Is that mobile secure? Many small to medium enterprises don't give their employees mobile devices, so there might be a question around, is that mobile device managed by the company? If not, and they are allowing them to access Outlook on the phone, make sure they have a lock on that phone. It's not a lot to ask of the employee, but if they lose that phone for the reasons of Outlook and for your multi-factor authentication app, which is on that phone, and maybe even your LastPass, you want to have a lock on that phone. Let me go back. Now, what you want to do on top of this is you want to audit your users and maybe create groups where you say this type of group needs certain type of access and this type of group needs maybe less access, and then you configure users accordingly for the different protocols. This is a very good thing to do, but it's often overlooked when people are configuring their Office 365 security. Now, mailbox rules. Mailbox rules are something we should all be aware of as an organization. They are often the way leaks have happened. And so, for example, invoice fraud and data leaks usually involve mail flow rules. Now, it's often a way of knowing that after the fact that you have had a breach, but you need to be aware of them because you want to pick up these breaches as fast as possible. Now, luckily, the main form of this, which was external forwarding. So you really don't want to have external forwarding of mail outside of your organization. It's not a good idea. External forwarding rules are a major source of data leaks, and hackers will get into your account and they will set up external forwarding to their own mailbox so that the mail is forwarding and they have all your mail, and then they can get in and do man-in-the-middle attacks and things like that. Excuse me. Now, it's luckily Microsoft have blocked external forwarding on many tenants. However, there is ways around this, and you can add exceptions to this. The other type of mailbox rules that hackers invariably use are quite noticeable ones, whereby they are trying to do something like invoice fraud. I've created a blog on this actually on our site. There's one on protocols actually, if people want to know more about the protocols. It's called Secure Office 365 for Remote Access on our main site. And also there's one on risky inbox rules. And what you'll find is hackers will use something along this line where they hack an account and then they set up a rule to move anything which has a subject of something like invoice to an obscure folder, such as the RSS folder, and then they'll get out. And then what will happen is over time, invoices will go into that RSS folder and be completely moved, and the employee won't see them. They'll then log back in, check that folder, respond to those invoices, tell them the account numbers have been changed or whatever it is, how they want to make their invoice fraud happen, and then steal the money. And then you have no idea, and they become essentially the man in the middle. And so you need to look out for inbox rules with subjects like invoice, payment, password is usual one. You know, people sending around passwords in emails, as we talked about earlier, is a very bad idea. I'm just trying to see, I think I have a tab showing mailbox rules. I don't have any on this tenant actually, but you should take a look at your mailbox rules for each of your mailboxes. Now, where was I? Okay, mailbox rules. The other side of mail flow rules are transport rules. They're generally not used by attackers because they're global and they would require an administrator of some kind to create. However, they can form data leaks from your company. A common one, we would use one internally in Optiga. For example, I set one up when an application that we're using called Jira was sending too much mail, but I did want some mail from Jira. So I set up a mail flow rule to block certain things. That would be an example of how mail flow rules can be used on a global sense, but they could also be used to route stuff externally. You can leverage them for useful things such as blocking certain domains that you know are sending you spam or whatever. Okay. Moving on, because I don't want to take up too much time, I've already come up to the half hour. Share with care, or as I tell my kids, sharing is caring. Trying to get my 3-year-old share with my 5-year-old. Anyway, getting down to this, email is not a safe method of file sharing. Some of you will know this, and some of you might find this a strange concept. If I told you, don't send attachments with your emails, it's not a good idea. Immediately you might react and say, well, how in God's name am I supposed to send those spreadsheets to those accountants? And the answer is to use links instead, links that can expire, or one of the other sharing mechanisms provided by SharePoint and OneDrive and Teams. OneDrive on your computer, SharePoint in your organization, or Teams in your organization, that allows for control over those links. Okay, so what you want to do is you want to pick a sharing strategy that's suitable for your company. Some companies will only allow sharing to users and guest users where the user is actually selected. However, we would recommend going to the topmost level and allowing anonymous link sharing. The reason for this is that if you get too tight on your sharing policy, you'll find people will just revert to sharing using attachments, and then you've thrown the baby out with the bathwater effectively. So we would suggest to allow sharing via links, but only if the links expire. The reason for this is if you get hacked, the attacker doesn't have access to attachments because you haven't been sending attachments, hopefully, but you've been sending links instead, and most of these links would have expired after a certain period. So the attacker, all they have is a bunch of dead links. So you're really cutting down on your chance for data leak and audit and other GDPR nightmares after that. So you want to pick a sharing strategy. The other reason, it's just good business sense. If I send an attachment, that attachment effectively creates a copy, and then someone edits that, and now if there's 2 versions of the file, which version is the right version? Whereas if you send a link, you can make it, you know, non-editable, or you can make it versioned and control the versioning. It just makes good business sense to share links and not share files. Okay. The other thing to do is to take control of SharePoint. SharePoint Admin Center, I think I have one open here somewhere along my SharePoint. I can move this thing. SharePoint Admin Center. Within the Admin Center allows for you to go in and see all of the SharePoint settings, sites that are being used within your company. Remember, SharePoint, we now not see SharePoint a lot. A lot of us use Teams and OneDrive. However, SharePoint is the thing that sort of backs these 2 up. Okay, and when we take a look at our sharing within a company, we can see that, oh, I don't have the link open anymore. This is a terribly annoying little thing. in SharePoint Admin Center, we can see that there are roles for each one of our SharePoint sites. And so what you want to be doing is setting up your SharePoint as the main file store within your company, because documents are there to be communicated within a company. So rather than people storing them on their personal computers or even within the OneDrive, encourage people to store things within Microsoft Teams, which is backed up by SharePoint, or in SharePoint itself, and then share with links within Teams or emails through that. And now you have full control over SharePoint within your company. You can take, you could create one for your marketing department, one for your managers, one for God knows what sections of the company, and apply different policies to those companies. If you click on any site, for example, and you click on the 3 dots in your SharePoint Admin Center, you go into permissions, you can see who are the site members and who can access that. And you can then control that within your company. The beauty of this also is, if someone decides to do something malicious or leave the company maybe, and they have their laptop, they have all the access to all those files, whereas in the SharePoint, you can immediately cut them off. And you can also audit when they access those files and maybe downloaded everything before they left the company and stole the company's portfolio and took it to another company, or so on and so forth. So SharePoint is a really, really good thing to do. Encourage your company as a policy for employees to store stuff in SharePoint and then control that. Moving swiftly back, so I don't want to take up too much more time with people. As we said, we're just cutting a very thin layer over sharing for Office 365, and so I'm not going to go too far deeper, but it does get quite a bit deeper. We're just going to look at audit. So everyone gets breached or has a data leak at some point, and you need to be aware of your auditing abilities and how to access the audit logs. Unfortunately, and it's possibly due to policy and compliance reasons, it's possibly due to storage reasons, Microsoft do not turn on what they call the universal audit log by default. So the first thing you should do in your tenant is you should go and you should check if the universal audit log is turned on. You can do this through the Security and Compliance Center, down Security and Compliance Center. There is a section here for, is it in e-discovery or data privacy? I don't recall, but it's somewhere in there where you can go in and you can view the audit logs and you can turn on the universal audit log. In fact, the first time you go in to view the audit logs, it'll say it's not turned on and turn it on. It takes about a few hours to start sucking logs. And what the universal audit log does is it sucks logs from everywhere within your organization. Mailbox audit logs, Azure access logs, SharePoint logs, you name it, and it puts it all in one place. And now you have an audit trail of everything that happens within your company, and you can view that when something goes wrong, essentially. So you want to turn that on. The other one is there's mailbox audit logging, and unfortunately Microsoft doesn't always turn on all of the mailbox actions to be audited, and there are some documents in Microsoft documentation for doing this. It can be done through PowerShell. Optica have a tool for doing it, and you can see all the mailbox actions that get audited by default and not by default. Basically, you want to turn on as many of these as possible. Microsoft doesn't have them on for some reason at the start. So you want to turn those on, because then those mailbox audit logs are going to get sucked into your universal audit logs, which you should have turned on at this point. When you view your mailbox audit logs is another thing. It's maybe something you do after a breach. When should you do this? It's something that, I'm going into my other window. I have a little guy in here. There we go. When you view audit logs, there's certain things you're looking for, certain event types. User logged in is important. There's also one for a very important one, Mailbox Rules. So here's an anatomy on our tenant where I set up a fake hack by logging in from a VPN and accessing our website. So I logged in from a location outside of our organization. It'll give you the IP address. The user logged in, created some inbox rules. And so now you've got an audit of the breach that happened, and you can see all the things that happened before and after it, so that you can find out what really went wrong, what accounts you should shut down, and what data has been accessed. It's going to also audit all of your SharePoint access and things like that. So your audit logs are really very important, both from before you get hacked and after. I guess that really concludes my short webinar presentation. I'm going to see if there's any, maybe, I don't know if people have any questions. I'll give people a moment. Maybe I'll turn on, allow people to shout things out or open questions, and just give people a minute. So one question here, does Outlook have a link expire feature? Yes, Outlook have a link expire feature. So when you go to share something, the way I would normally do it is I would go to the file itself and I would right click on it and I would create, and I would go to share. And if I'm doing it on my computer, I'm going to get a share link from OneDrive. I did advocate the use of SharePoint earlier, but it's okay to use OneDrive too. And then you get the choice of, you know, whether to use a link with an expiry on it. I believe Outlook has the ability to do that also, although I personally don't use it so much. I try to do it from the file because I'm usually working with the file. Then I go to want to share it, and then I create an email around that. But I believe it does have the ability to pick a point, to pick the file from SharePoint, and I believe from there on you can create a link expiry on it. Or is there something that it can be enabled in the admin? Thanks. Yeah, so again, I start from, I'm not going to open my Outlook for GDPR reasons at the moment, but I believe it has a way of accessing your SharePoint, and from there I believe it should have a link expiry. Okay, great. Thank you for your question. Any other questions on that? Do people have any thing they'd like to add? Or thanks everybody for coming today. I'll just give 2 more seconds in case anybody has anything they want to add. Look, this was a very short webinar. I don't want to get in too deep in Microsoft. Look, Microsoft Office 365, Azure, SharePoint, security, it can get quite deep and quite complex. You know, in summary, I think do these 10 things that I talked about here. If you go to our website, optega.io, when you visit it for the first time, it'll give you an e-guide you can download, which are the 10 steps to secure your Office 365, which is much of the stuff I went through in this webinar. I'll be placing this webinar up there. We've got some blog articles as well that are around securing SMEs and things like that, which can be quite useful. And we have an application, shameless plug, that enables people to monitor their audit logs, alert, and to wizards that help them configure their Office 365 security much more easily than through Microsoft, we believe. Thank you very much. Very clear advice and very well presented. Oh, thank you very much. So guys, I think I will conclude it at that. If you see excellent info, Optega clearly adds considerable value. Thank you very much. Great. Okay. Brilliant. Okay. Thanks for the response, guys. And I hope you know, do visit our site. Send us some, you know, if you have any questions, there's a section on our site where you can raise some questions. You can contact us, access our blogs, access our e-guides, and maybe sign up for a free trial on our software, which is being released. We're notifying the world hopefully next week of a release. And again, our software can, you know, help to monitor Office 365 and remediate issues and configure it correctly. And you know, go on at the moment. There's a resource for Cyber Awareness Month, which is to give people extended free trials. So do avail of that, or contact me if you have any questions around that. Okay, folks, I will leave it at that and see if there's no more questions. Just a few thank yous, and be safe. Thanks, folks. Bye-bye.